Hi there, this is Power and Politics. I'm JP Tasker in Ottawa. Prime Minister Mark Carney moves to deepen Canada's ties to a key ally.
We're moving from a world where there's exposure to vulnerability that countries like Germany, Canada, partnership with the European Union, can provide stability and prosperity for our citizens.
Canada looks to diversify its partnerships abroad as it faces trade pressure from its southern neighbor. Coming up, Germany's ambassador to Canada on how the two countries want to work together. Plus, as Carney tours Europe, his top Canada-U.S. trade negotiator heads to Washington. This after Canada announced it would be lifting some retaliatory tariffs on U.S. goods. We'll get the latest on those meetings in Washington just ahead. And a shocking story in the National Post. The Power panel is here to talk about what happens when a journalist is added to a group text with staffers to a cabinet minister. Power and Politics starts right now. We begin with Prime Minister Mark Carney's European tour. He's in Latvia today after stops in Poland and Germany. It's part of Canada's push to diversify trade and economic partnerships amid a trade war with the U.S. For more on this, Matthias Lüttenberg is Germany's ambassador to Canada, and he joins me now live in studio. Nice to see you, Ambassador. Thanks for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
So Canada needs some allies right now as we're grappling with this situation with the United States and the trade war. It seems like things are pretty positive between Canada and Germany right now. How would you describe our relations after the two leaders met today?
Well, I couldn't agree more. I think things are indeed very positive. It was a fabulous visit from my point of view. First of all, it's great to see the Prime Minister in Europe, but also in Germany in particular. I think Germany is the biggest economy in Europe. It's certainly a very good partner to Canada and vice versa. And we have so much in common. We share so many values, but we also have a joint interest in the diversification of our trade routes, for example. And so the focus was very much on these issues today.
Right. As you know, former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said there was no business case to sell liquefied natural gas to Europe. We are hearing a very different message from Prime Minister Carney today. He said there's amazing potential opportunities if we open a new port in Churchill, Manitoba. We know that Germany is buying millions of tons of LNG from the United States and Qatar, not Canada, as a result of really inaction by past governments on developing LNG. Would Germany be a customer for our liquefied natural gas if we did get our act together, if you will, and start producing some of this and sending it over to Europe?
Well, ultimately, that's certainly up to the companies in Germany, the buyers, to decide if they want to purchase LNG from Canada. But I would see a huge potential for a business case, at least. And I see and I hear from the conversation that we are having with German companies that they do care about LNG. And we, as the government, certainly want to pave the way for any sort of imports, because, as we said in the beginning, the diversification, especially in LNG imports, is of relevance to us as well. We have done our homework. We're working on the relevant import infrastructure in our ports. So we're getting ready for everything, especially also with a view to hydrogen on the longer run. But LNG imports we are doing already, so we are there. And I hope that Canada would also fulfill this step. And what I heard today in the press conference of the Prime Minister with the Chancellor in Berlin was very encouraging in this regard.
Yeah, they also talked about critical minerals. There seems to be some sort of deal struck today. We don't really have a lot of details as to what exactly the two countries have agreed to do. Can you kind of shed some light on that for me, for our audience? What have they agreed to do on critical minerals? Is there some sort of timelines for the projects that are under discussion?
Well, I would describe the document which was signed today by Ministers Hodgson and Reiche, the German Minister of Economy, as a framework document which would help us as a joint declaration of intent, help us to promote the exports of critical minerals and to jointly seek for diversification of our routes, but also to work jointly on research, for example, to work jointly on all sorts of critical minerals related activities. And it's not yet with a timeline, and it's still not very concrete in terms of single projects which we wanted to undertake, but it opens the door, and we do have some support schemes both in Germany and in Canada, like a raw materials fund in Germany, which we will use for the benefit of our cooperation in critical minerals.
Canada and Germany did about $30 billion in two-way trade last year, so a sizable amount, as you say. We are large trading partners. I think you're our sixth largest, so certainly very consequential. How much higher can we go from $30 billion? What's a reasonable expectation in terms of trade between our two countries as we move forward?
Well, actually, I think there's still room for improvement, certainly so, and critical minerals could be a cornerstone in this improvement, but also our cooperation in other areas. We have a lot of investments already. We have around 500 German companies which are present here in Canada, and I think that with the development south of our border to the United States, that certainly other countries, other businesses are also looking at Canada more favorably than ever before. So I see it's well possible that we are seeing another increase in this trade volume. Yeah.
Is Canada looking better now, given what's happening in the United States?
Well, you never looked bad, so therefore I think, yeah, at least it's becoming more and more visible for Germans, for European companies, because of what happened in terms of tariffs. But we always looked at Canada very favorably because they are a close ally at the G7, NATO ally, and therefore we always had an open eye on Canada for sure.
Let's talk about Ukraine. How does Germany feel about the prospect of a peace deal? It seemed like things were moving in the right direction last week after that summit at the White House, but now things seem to have stalled a little bit and negotiations have hit a wall, at least between Volodymyr Zelensky and Vladimir Putin. How do you see things? What's the current state of affairs in your eyes?
Well, I think, first of all, it's very important that the meeting in Alaska took place between the presidents, and it's, of course, very important that we also had the meeting with Volodymyr Zelensky in Washington, and that we are at least approaching some sort of peace process. But we also say it's very clear that we have to find a way to stop the killing and to arrange for a ceasefire arrangement. Ukraine has to be on the table. They have to be with talking to Vladimir Putin directly, and if President Zelensky is ready to do that, I hope that also the Russian side would agree, and therefore we're very grateful for the efforts of the U.S. president to try to bring everybody together to that table. The chances were probably never better in the last 3.5 years, but we're certainly not there yet. It takes a lot of effort on the diplomatic front. We're happy to be part of it, but jointly with Canada, for example, in the coalition of the willing, we're also doing a lot jointly there.
On the security guarantees for Ukraine, Prime Minister Mark Carney has floated the possibility of Canadian troops being on the ground in Ukraine in a post-war situation if we do come to that peace deal that you're talking about. What is Germany willing to offer for its part of keeping the peace in Ukraine?
Well, we are having this discussion as we speak in Germany, but also among partners in the coalition of the willing, as we call it. In this coalition, we are discussing several options. One, of course, would be to send boots on the ground, so our own soldiers to Ukraine, but there's many other ways also to guarantee that Ukraine can defend itself, that they will not be attacked again after a possible peace deal. And this is what we are currently deliberating with our partners, and certainly Germany will play its part in it, not only continuing what we are doing in terms of delivery of arms and other aid, but certainly also more than that. But the decision if to send troops or not is not being taken in Germany yet.
Okay, we'll leave it there. Thank you so much. Matthias Lüttenberg, Germany's ambassador to Canada. Thank you for coming in, sir. Thank you for sharing your thoughts. It's nice to see you.
Thank you very much.
Prime Minister Mark Carney also stopped in Latvia today, where he announced an extension to Canada's military mission there until 2029. There are 2,000 Canadian Armed Forces troops in Latvia as part of Operation Reassurance. It's Canada's biggest overseas mission. The troops have been there since 2017 to strengthen the defense of Europe's eastern flank and deter Russia from invading Baltic countries. While Prime Minister Mark Carney forges new ties overseas, efforts are underway to repair old ones on this side of the Atlantic. Coming up, what we know about a high-level meeting today in Washington. Then we'll check in with Alberta's point man on the Canada-U.S. trade talks. Stay with us. There could be some movement on the Canada-U.S. trade front. The cabinet minister leading those talks, Dominic LeBlanc, is in Washington and met this morning with Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick. The CBC's Ashley Burke joins us now from the U.S. Capitol. What can you tell us, Ashley?
JP, a Canadian source tells me that there is a sense of urgency right now, that the Canadian side sees a window to try and land a trade deal with the U.S. But the source also says that there are no guarantees that it will happen in the next few weeks. Canada-U.S. Trade Minister Dominic LeBlanc is here right now in Washington. He met with Donald Trump's Secretary of Commerce, Howard Lutnick, this morning and posted a photo online calling it a productive meeting. LeBlanc's office says it lasted about 90 minutes, and it's all part of Canada's efforts to try and get the Trump administration to drop or at least lower a series of tariffs hitting Canadian sectors hard. Here's what the Prime Minister said today.
Aluminum, steel, autos, copper. They happen to have a specific on copper, and then, of course, lumber, softwood lumber, which has been an issue. So those are the areas where immediately we are focused on improving the outcomes. In order to do that, we will have to look at other areas where we can have win-win cooperation, other areas.
Today's meeting here in Washington comes after the Prime Minister announced last week that he would drop some retaliatory tariffs on the U.S. because he says he was given assurance by Donald Trump over the phone that it would intensify talks.
And Ashley, you've learned more details about how this meeting came about. What can you tell us?
JP, the Canadian source tells me that after the Prime Minister's announcement that he would drop some of those countermeasures, that Mark Carney and Donald Trump exchanged texts and that they agreed LeBlanc would come here to Washington for these talks. The source also said there was a recognition from the American side that Canada had taken a significant step by removing some of these countermeasures and that talks should pick up. We also know that Canada's ambassador to the U.S., Kirsten Hillman, was also at today's meeting with Lutnick. The Prime Minister's Chief of Staff and Canada's Clerk of the Privy Council are also here. These are all top officials really signaling how serious these conversations could be. But what's not clear, JP, is where these negotiations are at behind closed doors and how close or not Canada actually is to reaching a deal.
All right, the CBC's Ashley Burke in Washington for us tonight. Nice to see you. Thanks for coming on. As Ashley was saying, the Prime Minister's negotiating team just wrapped up a long meeting with their U.S. counterparts in Washington. Minister Dominic LeBlanc changed his plans for trade meetings in Mexico to go to Washington instead after Canada dropped some retaliatory tariffs on the U.S., something Alberta Premier Daniel Smith has long been calling for. Nathan Cooper is Alberta's representative in Washington, and he joins me now. Nice to see you, sir. Thanks for coming on.
Hey, thanks so much for having me today, JP, and a very pleasant D.C. afternoon to you.
I'll take it. So U.S. Trade Representative, or U.S. Trade Minister, I should say, Dominic LeBlanc just wrapped up a meeting with his U.S. counterpart in Washington. We're told by a Canadian official that it was a constructive and lengthy meeting today and that they may actually meet again later this week. What's your reaction to that, sir?
Well, we think that any time that you can have constructive dialogue with the United States, that's a positive step for Canada. The Premier has long been a supporter of a diplomatic first approach, and so we're pleased to see some of the steps that she advocated for in the early days of this conflict to sort of coming to fruition, and hopefully we can have a very good and strong resolution, not just for Alberta, but for all of Canada.
Yeah, and it wasn't just Minister LeBlanc who was part of that diplomatic effort, as you call it. There was Ambassador Hillman, Canada's top representative when it comes to negotiations. She was in the room. We also are hearing that Mark Carney's Chief of Staff, Marc-André Blanchard, was also on hand for these discussions. So some of the government's heaviest hitters were here today in D.C. What does that tell you about the state of these talks?
Well, I think seeing progress that we've seen in the past week or so, the Premier was very pleased to see the retaliatory tariffs lifted. I hope that that's a sign of good faith. It's something that we've long advocated for, and the Premier, of course, has spent a significant period of time advocating for free and fair trade. And I think to see those non-CUSMA compliant tariffs lifted is certainly a step in the right direction. And it's our hope that we come to a very fair and reasonable deal in the very near future.
Do you think it's a coincidence that Minister LeBlanc gets a meeting days after Mark Carney drops those retaliatory tariffs? Do you see a connection between what they did on Friday and these talks that are unfolding now here on Tuesday?
Well, I think between the call that the president and the prime minister had, this step and hopefully others, we're going to see a positive resolution to this. Listen, no matter what the case is, there's significant and ongoing challenges, whether we see with lumber or auto or others, steel and aluminum, and ensuring that we continue dialogue, that we have these conversations is the best path forward. Tariffs, U.S. tariffs on Canadian goods hurt Canadians and Americans and American businesses, and the reverse is also true. U.S. tariffs hurt those who have to pay them and the businesses associated with that. So we need to see a strong, fair deal for all Albertans and all Canadians. And the other thing is that Canada can take steps to strengthen our economy at home as well by repealing some of the challenging policies that have a net negative impact, particularly on our energy sector.
Right. You're welcoming this decision to pull back the retaliatory tariffs, but there has been some pushback in other circles to the Prime Minister's decision. We're hearing, of course, from Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre. He says that Carney is weak and that he's losing. And Mr. Poilievre is also seeming to call for more countermeasures. He's not necessarily happy that these tariffs are gone. What's your message to the Conservative leader?
Well, the Premier has advocated for diplomatic first approach. That's what she did when she came to Washington to advocate on behalf of Albertans and Canadians, I might add. The Premier has done an incredible job of communicating this message that Canadians, our economies, Canada and the U.S. are intermingled, that we all win when both of our economies are strong. Alberta trades $188 billion a year with the United States of America. And Canada is America's largest customer. And so we need to do what we can to be focusing on making sure we have a fair deal for Albertans and Canadians and putting the needs of our economies and Canadians ahead of the cut and thrust of day-to-day politics.
So Mr. Poilievre is wrong when he says there should be countermeasures. Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm not saying that at all. What I'm saying is that we need to have a diplomatic approach to these negotiations, and that's exactly what the Premier has advocated for.
The Prime Minister has been pitching the current arrangement as the world's best. You know, we have the lowest effective tariff rate. Roughly 85% of our goods are still trading tariff-free thanks to CUSMA, including many energy products, as you well know. Do you think that we can get any better than what we already have? We know Trump loves his tariffs, and he doesn't seem to be budging with any other country when he does these negotiations. Do you think what the current arrangement is the best it's going to be?
Well, I think that having the overwhelming majority of energy and agriculture products CUSMA compliant and that having a net impact on the Alberta economy, of course, is an excellent thing. And I do believe that the Premier played a significant part in helping make that happen. And so I think we should all be thankful for the fact that the overwhelming majority of products are currently CUSMA compliant. Is it the best deal? Time will tell. I think that it's important that we continue to work for the best deal. And so that's why we're pleased to see the retaliatory tariffs as well as the ongoing negotiations taking place between the federal government and the U.S. government. And we hope for a quick and fair resolution for Albertans and for all Canadians.
I want to end on this note. The Prime Minister said today that the two sides are looking for other areas of cooperation. So Canada can make some progress on the sectoral tariffs on the steel, aluminum, the autos, the lumber. Do you know what he's talking about there when he says that there may be some other areas of cooperation that could get us off the hook from those 232 tariffs?
Well, I know that Alberta would be very excited to talk about North American energy dominance and ways that we can help be part of the energy security solution for the United States, and we'll be continuing to talk about ways that we can be part of a fair, free, and open trade with respect to energy, and ways that we can be creative of trying to help secure U.S. energy dominance that will have a net positive impact on Alberta's economy and as a result on the Canadian economy at large.
All right, let's leave it there. Nathan Cooper is Alberta's representative in Washington. Thanks for coming on, sir.
Thanks so much, JP. Have a wonderful evening.
Alberta's Environment Minister is speaking out against the federal electric vehicle mandate. We'll ask her why she says it ignores reality and punishes Canadians. Next, stay with us. Prime Minister Mark Carney says he's deepened trade and defense ties with Germany. The two countries signed a declaration of intent on critical minerals aimed at bolstering both the defense industry and electric vehicles. But here at home, the Liberals' electric vehicle mandate continues to face backlash. Yesterday, Alberta's Environment Minister released a video calling it a failed policy.
Just like the carbon tax, it's all pain and no gain. It will drive up costs. It will limit how far you can travel. It will make winter driving unreliable and potentially unsafe, and it will leave Canadians stuck.
For more on this, Alberta's Minister of Environment, Rebecca Schultz, joins me now. Nice to see you, Minister. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks so much for having me.
So you say Alberta will not accept the federal electric vehicle mandate. Do you want to see it scrapped entirely, delayed, or just rejigged? What's your position on this?
You know, we think it needs to be scrapped entirely. The fact that the federal government's mandate says that 20% of all vehicles sold and purchased are going to be EVs by next year and 100% by 2035 is completely unrealistic. It is totally devoid of reality. First of all, Canadians are not choosing electric vehicles. The number in a percentage terms of electric vehicles that people are buying this year over last, June over June, 35% decrease in people making that choice. I think a lot of that probably has to do with economics, which of course is a top priority for Canadians across the country. But then also from a cost and a grid perspective, I mean, for the grid to be able to sustain this with all of the charging equipment needed to actually roll this out by 2035 would cost tens of billions of dollars. And of course, we have a Canadian winter. So not having the charging capacity, putting our electricity grids at risk for something that is going to cost Canadians more and potentially leave you stranded in a Canadian winter, I really just don't think that that is a choice Canadians want to make right now. They, voted for this new federal government. I would say it's, the same government, but new leadership, new prime minister, largely because they ran on a campaign of growing our economy, and policies like this do the exact opposite.
What's the main reason for your opposition, though? Is it all those practical considerations that you just talked about, or is it an ideological opposition to this sort of policy altogether?
It's a common sense concern of Canadians. Right now, affordability and economy are the top issues for Canadians. It certainly was the top issue of discussion during the last federal election. I think Canadians thought they were going to get a lot more common sense out of this government, but they're not. We have one minister, industry minister, Melanie Joly, saying that this government is not going to go down the path of policies that don't make sense. And then yet you have the federal environment minister saying that they're not going to make any changes. They're going to keep this EV mandate in place. It doesn't make any sense. I can tell you right now, I'm in Fort McMurray calling in a lot of very important industry for the Canadian economy up here. I've only been here for a couple hours, but I'll tell you, I haven't seen one electric vehicle.
Yeah, you probably won't see them there. Is that one reason why you're concerned, though, that if there is widespread adoption of these vehicles, it could drive down the price of oil? It could be bad for Alberta's economy. It could be bad for the budget here in Ottawa, too. Is that what is driving your opposition, this fear that if there is an EV in every driveway, gas prices might go down?
Our major concern is around affordability, the strength of our economy, and having a government held accountable. They ran on a platform of economics and affordability and taking care of Canadians and abandoning some of the radical policies that hurt our economy and cost Canadians more. I mean, when it comes to our energy industry, I'm not concerned. Energy, especially oil, being up here in the backyard of the oil sands, is used not only to fuel vehicles, but to create hundreds of products that we use in our day-to-day lives. Demand for energy is not going down. But what we are seeing is concern about these policies. I mean, the top 5 vehicle makers, Ford, General Motors, Toyota, Stellantis, coming out and saying that they are opposed to this EV mandate, that it is going to drive jobs out of Canada. You saw 48 mayors in towns and cities across Ontario saying that this is going to be a harmful policy. And yet you have a federal government who's digging in their heels in unrealistic policy. I don't think that's what Canadians voted for in the last federal election.
You mentioned the sales decrease, and it's real, and we know a lot of manufacturers are pulling back, as you say. I mean, Ford was supposed to retool Oakville and the plant there to produce electric vehicles. They've abandoned that. They're making pickup trucks there instead, because that's where they see the money going. But we really saw a sales dip after the feds pulled back on their incentives. Do you think that maybe if we just make those incentives better, more folks will buy EVs? Maybe that's a solution. Ottawa should just cut bigger checks to folks that buy these EVs. That might fix the problem.
Those incentives are still paid for through tax dollars. And I think Canadians are smarter than that. They realize that's their own money then being reinvested into a rebate program. But the grid issues still remain. We don't have enough charging stations. And right now, the federal government does not have the balance sheet to spend tens of millions of dollars to build up that infrastructure in just a few short years. So I think this is an area where the federal government could show common sense. It's one of a number of areas that we have pointed out that the federal government needs to step back when it comes to those radical radical environmental policies that don't make sense for Canadians. And I just think, you know, when we talk about the Canadian economy, again, being a top of mind issue for Canadians, I think the biggest impediment right now to growing the Canadian economy is in fact our federal government. I mean, just think about, you know, whether that be from a competitiveness perspective, from a productivity perspective, how much better off we would be as Canadians, as provinces, our major industries, if we weren't spending all of this time, effort, and money in fighting absolutely ridiculous, out of touch, job-killing policies from this federal government. So hopefully we've heard, I mean, look, we've heard from this new prime minister that he's going to take a different approach. We're a number of months in and we haven't seen them walk back on any of it or show any common sense or show any indication that they're going to prioritize the well-being of Canadians or our economy. And this would just be one simple way to show Canadians, look, we're listening. We know that this mandate would cost you more, would leave you stranded in the middle of a Canadian winter because we don't have the infrastructure to keep these EVs on the road.
I hear you about the winter thing and how the batteries don't necessarily always hold up as well in the cold weather, but Norway is not exactly Palm Springs, California, and we looked at some of their data from last month, and 9 in 10 new cars sold in that Scandinavian Nordic country are electric vehicles. So, I mean, how are they able to do it? Why do you think that it's working in Norway, but we can't make that sort of transition here in Canada? It obviously can be done in other cold weather jurisdictions.
Here's what I would say. I mean, you may see that in Norway. Here in Canada, you're still seeing 9 out of 10 vehicles sold and purchased being regular gas and diesel cars and trucks. And so, again, I would just say we saw a prime minister saying he was going to do things differently. He was going to prioritize our economy. But what we continue to see is this radical activist environmental agenda that is opposed by, again, it's not just the Alberta government. This is opposed by Canadians. It is opposed by the big 5 automakers who say that this is going to significantly damage that industry in Ontario and in Canada. And again, 48 mayors saying that this is the wrong policy. And so, you know, I would just say what we're asking for from this federal government is, you know, put your money for your mouth, where your mouth is. We've been waiting for a number of months already to see that common sense that they campaigned on. But this would just be one simple policy that they could step away from. You know, I would just say, though, that's only one of our asks. Obviously, we have a number of requests from the federal government in terms of policies that don't seem to make any sense, don't improve our competitiveness or our economic relationships and trade relationships, especially in this period of uncertainty.
I take your point, but Mark Carney has rolled over on some of these environmental policies. I mean, look at C5, essentially absolving any future project that is put on the national projects list from some of the more strenuous environmental laws that Justin Trudeau put forward. He has shown a willingness to change and step away from the Liberal playbook. What makes you think that won't happen here? And if they don't drop this mandate, what is Alberta prepared to do? Is legal action a possibility?
I would say we'll see. All we've heard is rhetoric and not a lot of action. I can tell you, I think people were willing to give the Prime Minister the benefit of the doubt, and there was some cautious optimism in some of the words that were spoken following the election. But the truth of the matter is Canadians are still waiting to see action. I mean, look, every Albertan could go out and purchase an electric vehicle, and it would not make a dent in overall emissions. What actually reduces global emissions is us being able to produce more Canadian gas, displace coal-fired generation and less responsibly produced energy in other areas of the world. Oftentimes we talk about China's, Southeast Asia. There are countries around the world looking for our energy, both from an energy security perspective, from an affordability perspective, but also an environmental perspective, because we know that would actually reduce global emissions. And so, you know, you say Bill C5, I think, you know, that's one way you can make a workaround around your challenging anti-investment legislation. I can tell you that in the last week, we were meeting with folks, industry leaders, and what they were saying around investment certainty is that despite how uncertain things are in the United States, investors are seeing a way around that. However, that investment is still not coming back into Canada. So I think, it's not just provinces that are looking for this federal government to show some action. It's Canadians and it's the investment community.
All right, let's leave it there. Thank you so much to Alberta's Minister of the Environment, Rebecca Schultz. Nice to see you. Thanks for coming on.
My pleasure.
As a journalist, you typically have to dig for stories, but sometimes they fall right into your lap, and that was certainly the case for a Canadian reporter who found herself accidentally added to a government staffer's group text. We'll tell you about that story and the revelations that surfaced from it coming up next, and the Power Panel is standing by with their take. Stay with us. Trade talks are back on in Washington just 4 days after Prime Minister Mark Carney announced a rollback of some retaliatory tariffs on the U.S.-Canada free trading relationship. U.S. Trade Minister Dominic LeBlanc met today with Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick. LeBlanc's office described the meetings as constructive and lengthy. Let's bring in the Power Panel to talk about this development. Cameron Ahmed was the head of communications to former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. Françoise Bavin is a former NDP MP. And here with me in studio is Kate Harrison, a conservative political analyst. Cameron, I'll start with you. Does that mean Mark Carney was right to drop these retaliatory tariffs if Dominic LeBlanc can get a meeting, just days later? Is this headed in the right direction now?
I'm probably best to refrain from saying if one move is right or wrong in this long process of negotiations. I mean, ultimately, what we learn from public comments and from public announcements like this one is only a fraction of what's actually happening behind the scenes. these negotiations rely on a ton of conversations behind the scenes between ministers, staff, the prime minister and the president, and everybody else who's working on the sidelines as part of the effort. So it's absolutely the right call to open the door to keep negotiating and keep the conversation going. Canada clearly had some leverage by imposing these tariffs in the first place, so that they were able to drop them. And it's the government's right to say, we're going to take the time to secure the best deal that we can for Canada, with as many of the unfair tariffs removed as possible, and not just rush to any deal like some other countries have done and have subsequently regretted, because as we know, these deals are subject to change at any moment. So all of this has to happen at the same time as the government diversifies our trading relationships around the world, especially in Europe and in Asia. And that's been the parallel priority of this prime minister since his very first week in office. And as we saw again this week in Europe, talking about new deals and more exports and imports with our biggest trading partners, and trying to diversify with countries like Germany.
Kate, I love that they always describe it as constructive. Like, we don't really know much more than that. It was constructive. When is it not constructive? Right. Do they ever tell us if it's not constructive? But one thing that was interesting is we were reporting, one Canadian official is telling us that there was a recognition from the Americans that Canada took a significant step last week when it dropped the retaliatory tariffs, and that it was time to increase the cadence of the discussions between Canada and the U.S. What's your read on this?
Yeah, I wonder why it may have taken 4 months to arrive at an increased cadence. We were told by the Prime Minister during the election campaign that this was the greatest crisis that we have faced. So to only make that move now, to look at reducing and removing counter tariffs now, which is something that only Canada and China imposed in the first place, one wonders what we were doing for the last 120 days. Cameron brings up the visit to Europe. Those are meetings that should be happening, of course, but those are medium to long-term payoffs. I don't think any Canadian is looking at the news today wondering what this means for their affordability, what it means for their job prospects. These are longer-term investments and initiatives that the government is undertaking, which should happen, but activity is not achievement. There's been lots of meetings, lots of conversations in DC and in Europe, and we cannot yet point to a single new defined proposal, some new investment, some new project, which I think Canadians will demand to see sooner rather than later, considering this is the crisis that we are in, according to the Prime Minister.
Was Carney right, though, to drop those retaliatory tariffs?
I think that counter tariffs make sense if they involve getting parties back to the table. And that was the goal, right? You try to inflict pain and speed up an agreement. That clearly was not happening, so it seemed like an inevitability.
It broke the logjam. At least it broke the logjam, right, Francoise? I mean, they hadn't spoken in weeks, LeBlanc and Lutnick. We know that deadline, they blew past the August 1st deadline. There was seemingly no progress in the hours before that deadline. And now LeBlanc's in D.C., they're having a 90-minute meeting. Things are going well, they're telling us. It's productive. They're having lengthy chats. And then the Prime Minister's Chief of Staff is even down in Washington sitting in on these discussions. What's your read on what's happened today?
I think we should pop the champagne bottle right away. No, actually, after all these months, there have been so many ups and then downs and so on and so forth. I think we're all playing at the tune according to Donald Trump. So you make one step forward, 2 steps backward. So in a sense, it's good to have those channels. And yes, by removing the tariffs, which were imposed, if I understood correctly, on things that were protected by CUSMA. So in a sense, you cannot argue that you want to stick to the CUSMA and then at the same time say, "Oh, I'm putting tariffs on these things." It was meant to attract attention. It did its thing, and the timing must have been great because they were asked to do so. The same way the taxing of the internet giants. Canada backed off from that. So far, negotiation with the states mean every time to back a bit further. Till what end will President Trump bring us to our to our, I wouldn't say our knees, because you're negotiating, and I'm not being critical of Canada at the same time. We're a tiny thing compared to the giant market that the Americans are. We are big in resource, and we're doing the right thing by trying to find other market to lessen our dependence. But that's as good as it goes. So as long as they talk to us until they trash us the next time, I just lost my optimism that we're there. I think, JP, you'll be talking about this for months still.
Yeah. I mean, Cameron,
not years.
Yeah. To the point about how we've dropped the digital services tax, we haven't hiked the retaliatory tariffs on steel, and now we've dropped the other retaliatory tariffs on the CUSMA compliant goods. Carney has definitely made some moves here, and we haven't really gotten anything concrete in return just yet. At what point do you think the Prime Minister has to deliver something to keep up this persona of being, you know, the fighter for Canada, the elbows up guy? Like, when does he actually have to produce something that's going to be good for this country?
Well, frankly, the best way to be a fighter for Canada is to keep negotiating until you can get the best deal for Canada. And these negotiations, like I said, are extremely complex behind the scenes, and they take a long time. I mean, we can't capitulate and just settle for any deal that's going to be harmful for us if we think there is a chance that we can get something better. We are, to Françoise's many good points, we're a relatively small country with regard to the United States and all the other countries that they're trying to strike deals with. We have a lot to lose. We are already feeling the pain from these tariffs. So the best thing the government can do is to be smart and tactical in its decisions and not obviously show all your cards. I mean, obviously things are different today. The context is completely different and has changed, but the what we're dealing with fundamentally is very similar to the first time we had to negotiate with the president and with the administration. And it took a long time, and there were ups and downs, and there were moments of prolonged quiet where we didn't hear a lot of news, and then there were big announcements and statements, and ultimately the government was able to secure a pretty good deal for the country and for our businesses. So that is the ultimate objective of the Prime Minister. And yeah, it is core to our long-term viability as a big, important trading country to have stronger deals and relationships in place with other countries. A lot of this groundwork was laid over the last 10 years and frankly under the previous Harper government too, to try and diversify our markets. But because of the reality of our shared border, there hasn't been a lot of expansion into new markets. So it is absolutely critical for the Prime Minister to walk and chew gum, for the government to keep negotiating, not share all the details in real time, but come to the table with other countries and show them that we're serious about becoming their premier partner for critical minerals, for resources, and for many other things that we have to offer.
In there.
Yeah, no one is saying it is not complex. But the Prime Minister campaigned and won an election on being the guy to get a deal done, being the one to negotiate with Trump. That is how he positioned himself in the election campaign. So we are now a quarter in to this mandate, and Canadians do not have anything to show in terms of a trade agreement. So the government has indexed heavily to showing progress on international trade and on the Canada-U.S. relationship. There's nothing there to show. Meanwhile, they've left themselves exposed on domestic policy. We're nowhere on housing, crime, immigration, affordability. So unless you're going to deliver on the former to try and offset the latter, then you find yourself empty-handed in both instances. And so I think, to your question, when does the Prime Minister need to show progress? I would say if there's not significant progress on Canada-U.S. trade and some of these international deals with tangible commitments, not just commitments to commit in the future and MOUs, by the end of this year, I think Canadians are really going to be wondering what it is that they voted for back in the spring.
Okay, I want to squeeze in another topic. Françoise, just hold your thought there. Closer to home, the federal government is trying to find, as we know, 15% savings across government departments. And one Canadian journalist got a sneak peek at how that's going. Stephanie Taylor from the National Post was mistakenly added to a group text among Environment Minister staffers. And in it, they were talking about the Prime Minister's instruction to cut spending. And they were deliberating whether they should make those cuts, fearing the, quote, political consequences of doing something like that. Francoise, this has got to be like the worst nightmare for a communications staffer to loop a reporter in on these talks.
It is the worst nightmare. And at the same time, I mean, I don't get how they still make those type of mistakes, especially in something so sensitive as the cuts, because they know that employees are nervous, stakeholders are nervous, taxpayers are wondering, different type of groups. And here we're talking more in the environmental groups. So, I mean, what a place to make a mistake. And the National Post, I mean, honestly, it's just, it might be not that much consequences because of what we read in the article, but still it shows that somebody is missing, and that's high level. It's not, it's at a minister's office level. So I would tend to be like so furious personally if I was in the shoes of the minister, because it puts her government in a problematic way.
Cameron, did you do something like that when you were on the job?
I was trying to think if I ever did. I think I may have accidentally talked about whether or not we should book someone on a show with the producer of that show. So it wasn't as sensitive as this. But
Yeah.
Look, this is bad. This is not great. Obviously very embarrassing for everyone involved, but mistakes happen. And I think it's a reminder to all staffers to slow down. You don't want to find yourself in this situation. Thankfully, as Francoise said, the subject matter it's not that as sensitive as other cases that we've heard about or read about. But it's never good when this kind of thing happens, and it's just a reminder, I think, to slow down and try and remember your protocols. And this is an important subject. It's one that's been discussed publicly already, but to deliberate these things in the presence of a journalist on a text message chain is not something any staffer wants to find themselves in.
Yeah, Kate, I mean, it's not a huge surprise that they're like worried about these cuts and what the optics will be of it. But it is kind of an interesting inside look that they are preparing for political blowback. They expect there will be a price to pay, perhaps, when they make deep cuts to federal spending.
Yeah, when the purse strings tighten, for sure there are political consequences. And I think for a department like Environment and Climate Change specifically, which had a very different mandate under the last government compared to this one, some of those cuts are going to be felt a lot more severely than perhaps in other departments like defense and public safety, just given the focus on those two things right now. So, I think good to see them that they're abiding by the direction that's been given. Obviously, to Cameron's point, it's embarrassing for those that are involved, but these are often overworked young people who maybe are a little reluctant to pick up the phone, and that's good advice. Pick up the phone if you're not sure about putting something in writing, and of course, don't add journalists to text chats, but it wasn't the nuclear codes. So
it could be worse.
Yeah.
Francois, quick final word to you on this one.
Well, I still remember in 2005, 2006, during the last election of Paul Martin government, I learned because a journalist received an email from some organizers in the Quebec section that here were the writings that they thought they couldn't win in the next election. They were right, because I did lose that seat. But I mean, to send it while you're campaigning and it's sent to a journalist, believe you me, when you're the organizer behind and it's your mistake, you feel. But when you're at the forefront and living it, and all my other colleagues from Quebec, and we were numerous that were set in that list, it just changed the whole direction of a campaign, of the volume. So it can have some impact. That's why I'm saying, in this case, maybe the impact is less, but maybe it's a refresher course, by the way, guys, to give to your employees before you push the send button. Check your list of
who you're talking to there. All right, let's leave it there. Thank you so much to the Power Panel, Cameron Ahmed, Francoise Boivin, and Kay Harrison. Thanks for your thoughts today. I'm JP Tasker. Thanks for watching Power in Politics. There's more coming up on CBC News Network. Stay right there.